Welcome back to Marketing Automation Made Simple. Today, I'm excited to have my previous guest called Ashleigh Alsadie, who, as you would remember, she was episode number 33, and we talked about cold calling. She's known as the cold calling queen, and she has 2 successful businesses where she runs a successful cold calling outreach business, as well as coaching and sales coaching for businesses. So that's really great. That's why I want to have her back. Welcome back, Ashleigh.
Thank you so much for having me. I absolutely loved recording our last podcast together and talking all things cold calling. And yes, as you said, I am known as that rare and crazy woman that loves doing all the sales grunt work that everyone avoids. And I'm really looking forward to the topics we'll discuss today.
Yes, no, I'm excited about this because I've been to presented to a group of business owners, 2 different groups, and where the topic really was highlighting was actually the cold calling and lead gen. That's where it was kind of moving towards, and so I thought, well, within marketing automation and what we do, we really focus on nurturing leads. Our job is really to help businesses simplify their sales process and then use technology to automate those sales processes. And so once a lead comes in, that's easy for us to then work out all these ways to nurture, to convert them. However, your superpower is really generating those leads from out of nothing, and also generated from LinkedIn or networking and things like that, and then bringing those leads into a business. And so there was a group of businesses that mentioned that they were buying lists, and it's really a cold list. And so my immediate thought was like, oh, cold lists. I'm not sure about, from my perspective, I believe we should really nurture them before we even talk to them. But I understand that's a different kind of field in the B2B space. And so I wanted to invite you back to talk about, especially on how we could, what businesses can do when they buy cold lists. And I get them all the time. I get emailed all the time, maybe 4 or 5 a day, where people claim, oh, you do this, and we can then go and scrape all these emails and buy these contacts and share with you. So yeah, I was thinking, do these things work? What do you find?
Yeah, do cold lists still serve a purpose is kind of the question. And look, I love this topic because I think when it comes to what we do at the Promo Donna, so this is my cold calling and lead generation company, cold list is the core of what we work with. So as much as we can definitely help with, say, following up warm leads or like your own leads, Jovana, that you've kind of nurtured, we can follow those up. But yes, the main, core focus with many of our clients is we'll source a new database or a new list, and we will contact them completely cold to try and generate new opportunities. So I think the simple answer is yes, they still definitely work. Right. But I think, one thing that you touched on, and this was actually off camera, we're having a bit of a chit chat, Jovana. You did say that, the company that had asked you about cold lists had said, oh, we're sourcing all of this new data, we're sourcing new lists. And you asked a great question. You said, what did you purchase them for? And so I think that's one piece of advice I would give everyone who's listening is, yes, we get inundated with those emails, and I do too, from people saying, oh, we could scrape data, we could get you great lists, but I wouldn't purchase them unless you have a purpose. Right. If you actually have a reason. So if you've, launched a new service, or you're really focused on growing the business and you do want to generate new leads, or I don't know, you're making a bit of a pivot and, you want to target a new industry or a new sector, something of that nature, they're valid reasons for sourcing new data. So I think, tip number 1, get focused and have a purpose for sourcing a new list.
Wow. Okay. Yes. Where would you go to buy a list if you were never done it before? So.
Yeah, and this is a great question because you're spot on. I think, there could be listeners thinking, okay, well, great, I have a purpose. What do I do next? So with the Promo Donna, when we start a campaign, that's step number 1 for us is we will say, okay, do you have a list that you can work with internally, or do you have to go completely cold and source new data? If they say, yes, we need something new, there's a range of different methods that you can use to generate a list. One that we will frequently use is actually going to a list broker. So there's actual companies out there that have all this data readily available. And the reason I love using a broker is because you can be very specific. So, getting the criteria right is another big tip that I'll give the listeners, because the list is so integral to what we do, and it's so integral to generating great results. If you source a list and it's not suitable for your campaign, you're not going to get the results that you want, bottom line. So, let's say, for example, I'm starting a campaign. I want to work with companies in, the branding and design, HR and IT space, let's say, or those sectors. I know I want to speak with sales managers. So that's the decision maker I want to speak to. And maybe I have categorized or kind of defined the fact that we want to work with companies that have a turnover or a revenue of $1 million plus, something of that nature. These are the kinds of things that you can actually tell the list broker you want. This is the kind of company, the size, the decision maker, the industry sectors, even the areas. I might specify, we just want to target Victoria, Melbourne, Victoria. So they can get very specific in sourcing the right list for you. Now, if you don't have access to a list broker, or say you don't have maybe the funds for a list broker, because obviously a list will cost you, you could actually use your own, kind of methods to go to market. Great platforms like LinkedIn have data readily available. You can actually purchase a bigger subscription so that you can gain access to people's information, and you can actually get very targeted on LinkedIn. Again, I want to speak with sales managers in Victoria, these types of industries, and then you can ultimately create a list off the back of that. So yeah, if not list brokers, using your own methods and trying to source something really specific.
Yeah, interesting. You mentioned, list brokers. I'm guessing they would be tasked with qualifying those leads, making sure their current, their database is always active or engaged, or somehow they get the right contacts, because there would be some instances where people would buy these lists, as in these cold outreaches that, for example, I would get from some random software companies from overseas, and they'll tell you, hey, this is what we can do for you, and we can give you thousands of qualified leads, and you don't have that trust that it's going to work. What would you recommend businesses not do when it comes to purchasing lists?
Oh, that's a great question. What would I not do? I think it again comes back to the being really specific and having clear criteria on who you want to work with. What I wouldn't do is I wouldn't just use a blanket approach of, someone approaches me and says, hey, we've got thousands of leads that we can feed through to you. Do you want to purchase it? And if you go ahead with something like that, you really don't know what you're getting. And not only that, you might not be targeting businesses or people that are a suitable fit for whatever you're offering. So I think a real blanket approach or a scattergun approach is not really going to work. You do need to get quite focused. And look, I think that would be my top tip, because again, I'm just thinking of all the campaigns we've done, all the cold outreach programs we've run, and there's never I wouldn't do that. It's more if they're specifically targeted and then we have a great approach, that's where the results can be created.
How many times do you think would require for you to convert those? Well, what's the expected conversion rate for these type of cold lists?
Yeah, so let's get it. I guess we're kind of getting into, well, okay, we've got our cold list now. How do we create results from this? Because again, if you are reaching out to completely cold leads, you do need to generate a great cold calling approach or a lead generation approach. This is probably coming back to me talking through step by step the sales approach that my team and I use each and every day when we are on the phones, because this is the approach that really gets us results. And also I find having a proven sales process in place, so almost like a step-by-step guide to your conversation, will not only create conversations and, good outcomes, but it gives you a lot more confidence. I know if someone buys a list and they've got all these cold leads, quite often, the feedback for me is, oh, well, I have this list, but I had no idea what to say when I called. So, I could talk about this all day, to be honest, Jovana, but as a very quick snapshot for everyone listening, the proven sales process that I always use is, number one, have a great elevator pitch, obviously. This is key to what we do, and especially when you have cold leads. So when you're calling someone who is cold, the likelihood is they've never heard of you. They've never heard of you, your company, your brand. So the elevator pitch is going to be critical. And, the elevator pitch, we have about 10 to 30 seconds, probably not 30, to be honest. It's very quick, to introduce who we are, what we do, and almost to add this kind of unique, compelling offer in the mix. It's got to be something that generates intrigue with your prospects. And I'll give you my top tip for doing that. It's about making it about the what's in it for them. So I'll always say to my clients, you can reel off why you're great, why you do what you do, and how many years you've been in business and how many awards you've won. No one really cares as a prospect. They want to know how you're going to help them. How are you going to help me to overcome my challenge or my points of pain? So if you're going to put together an elevator pitch for these cold leads, think about that. How do you help your clients? What is the what's in it for them? And then my other tip about your elevator pitch is come up with several different ones, because whenever we start a new campaign for the Promo Donna, and again, we're reaching out to cold leads, we might think we have a great pitch, and then we reach out to the first 10 people and, it just doesn't resonate. So come up with several different pitches, test it out, and just be aware that you might have to tweak it as you kind of go along. That's step one. Yeah, thanks. Yeah. So I think it's, all from experience, we know that it's always about that process of testing and measuring. But yeah, in terms of the process, so we do a great elevator pitch. The second step is we always ask great questions. And that's probably my top tip that I give people for, phone use, for cold calling, for cold outreach. Your role as a salesperson is not to bombard people with information. It's to ask great questions and get that conversation flowing. So have some open-ended questions. I might say, tell me a little bit about your sales process. How do you currently generate sales leads? What was your last, the last results of your lead generation campaign that you ran? Something that will get, the information flowing so how you can help them ultimately. Now, after you've done that pitch and you've asked some great questions, the last few steps of the process is, number one, asking, or I should say handling objections, because they're pretty inevitable. And I would definitely say this is going to be the case when you are reaching out to a new cold list, because people aren't aware of who you are and what you do. They'll quite often, say, we've got a provider who does that, or, we don't have the budget in place, those age-old objections that arise. And so a few tips from my end is, the first objection handling technique I love is to put the objection up front. So if you think that you are reaching out to a market where your services might already be prevalent, so, let's say you're an accounting firm and you're reaching out to small businesses, the likelihood is they're going to have an accountant in place. So my spiel might be something like, look, hi, John, it's Ashleigh from XYZ Accounting, a bit of a spiel, that elevator pitch about why we're different and unique. And then I might say, I understand that you would already have an accountant in place because you are a small business. However, in my experience, a lot of people review their providers, or they're not exactly happy with the service levels. Tell me a little bit about your experience with your current accountant. And it's amazing how that totally flips the results, because people suddenly will go, well, I do have an accountant, you're right, but, maybe they're not necessarily that happy or something along those lines. But also, if you're getting objections that are arising, just make a list and all of the solutions that you can ultimately provide back, or kind of rebuttals that you can give. And last but not least, if you followed that process of having a great pitch, asking great questions, handling objections, you should come to the close. So, a great outcome is when someone says, well, what's the next step? Where do we go to from here? But if they're not, giving you that great, feedback, you basically have to go back in the process to find out, where are they not seeing the value? Is it that I haven't handled an objection? Do I need to ask more questions? Or there are certain techniques like, using, say, the assumptive sale, close, where you might assume they're going to go ahead and use assumptive language. So there's all different techniques, but I guess that's a very long-winded answer to, how do we create good results with cold leads? It's all about having a great approach, a sales process in place, and mapping it out before you actually pick up the phone.
Yes. So how long would this process typically take? Because it sounds like what you, obviously that's going to depend on each client, depends on each, but how long should I, if I hired someone like you, how long do I expect for it to make some kind of impact?
That's a great question. Yeah. So look, I think, and I would answer it two ways. So in terms of how long would it take to come up with like a sales approach for a client? Firstly, what we do when a client starts with us is we run a workshop session where we pretty much brainstorm everything that I was just talking about. So tell me your elevator pitch, what are your key messages? What are some of the great questions we should be asking people? What objections might arise all the time for you? So we pretty much take that, all of that information from that session, and then we develop our own scripts that we, train up the team with, and then we get to use as a guide. So our process, it doesn't take that long. It's probably like a week to 2 week turnaround time just to have all those scripts developed and the team trained up. But then I think secondary to that answer, the other side of it is, well, how long will it take to see results, with a cold list? And, it's kind of a loaded question, I would say, because, it depends on the outcomes you're trying to generate. If you're someone that is jumping onto a cold list and you're simply wanting to set up appointments, let's say, you should see results quite quickly. It's all about making the calls, committing to the follow-up. I find in general, it probably takes on average 2 to 3 calls to get through to the right person and have a great conversation. So that's one thing for people to keep in mind. But once you've had that conversation, if you've got a great process, you should be able to create a good outcome. And let's say it is an appointment. But then I said it was a loaded question, and that's because, if a client is looking to convert new business, then that's a whole other ball game, because it does depend on, what industry you're in, what's your sales cycle. So we've got clients that some of them, they'll run, a campaign for a month with us. We'll generate immediate appointments, within the first few weeks. And they'll be able to convert that person quite quickly, because their sales cycle is quite short. However, we've got other clients where they know, well, this is a long-term focus. We need to get in front of people, but we might not convert them for 3 months. So that's when we start to see traction, a bit further down the track. But yeah, I think if people commit and they know, they have realistic expectations, and that's all looking back at what have they produced with their own clientele in the past, that will enable them to stay focused and, just kind of expect the outcomes as they should come.
Yeah. So, it's interesting. I was going to ask you, maybe this is a great one, because I get these all the time, and I get phone calls all the time. I actually set up a gatekeeper, just a voicemail message that says, I actually don't pick up my phone anymore. Can you please SMS or email? Or it goes to our receptionist who takes a message. So what do you do then? I mean, obviously people are not, I'm assuming people are not answering phones as much as they used to. They're probably in their TikToks and Instagram DMs. I don't know.
I mean, again, this is, a great thing to discuss, because I think you're right. There is an assumption in the market from a lot of people that, again, cold calling or kind of your cold outreach doesn't really work as much as it used to, because, as you said, people aren't available as much, or there's more gatekeepers out there. But in my experience, and I mean, gosh, I've been running the Promo Donna now for 12 years, and I can't believe that, next month. And I would say I have actually seen an increase, if anything, in the amount of opportunity or results that we've been able to create over the past few years. And I think what I put it down to, when people say, well, why is that? Why is that occurring? I think the world that we live in now, we obviously went through some really tough times with the likes of the lockdowns and all of that, where we were online. We had to do all these Zoom meetings. We had to, we weren't able to meet face to face. And even to that extent, sometimes we were more liaising via email or via text or something of that nature. So I think that human to human contact, people are craving it more than ever. And I think that they, again, are wanting to get out and about again and meeting with people. So I think that's why we've seen a bit of an uptick in terms of our capability in booking, face-to-face appointments. And the cut through, I think people are more willing to have conversations, because they're, getting back into business as normal and saying, yes, I'm open to, reviewing or discussing whatever it is you might be pitching. So I think, that's one side of my answer to that is, it's alive more than ever. Cold calling is not dead, because that human to human contact is being craved. And on top of that, I think, to also answer your query kind of relating to gatekeepers, I think, again, you have to have a really well-developed approach to that. Some of the tips I would give people around, dealing with gatekeepers is Number one, understand that they are going to be there, and they are kind of the people that they hold the key to the city, so to speak. So we do have to respect them and kind of befriend them. So that's one of my techniques that I train a lot of people in is, when you call a company, if you're reaching a gatekeeper, as we like to call them, you want to befriend them. You want to build rapport, remember their name, call up and say, oh, hi, Jenny, we spoke last week. I was trying to reach John, kind of have this conversation where you're getting to know them as much as you're getting to know the decision maker, and try and get them on side. It could be as simple as saying, I'm just wondering if you might be able to help me, because I know that who's the best person to talk to within the company. This is a little bit about what we do. Can you help? But I'd also say to that point that with the receptionist, with the gatekeeper, you don't want to, again, bombard them with a lot of information. So quite often my team and I will develop a script for them as much as we will for the decision maker. And it's going to be a little less of a spiel. You don't want to kind of waffle on. You want to get straight to the point, but you also want to make it very clear and compelling as to why you're calling and why you should be speaking to someone. But as I said, get them on side, try to get their help, and that might help you to achieve a bit more cut through.
Yeah. Oh, wow. That's great advice. I'm remembering now that personal connection, and during even the lockdowns, just getting literally physical mail in your mailbox. It's such a it's exciting. We don't get that as much as, an email, electronic email, or a message on LinkedIn or somewhere like that. So having some kind of old school traditional marketing, introducing that again as part of your overall sales process can actually be very helpful and set you apart from other businesses. But I remember also receiving a cold call because most of the calls I get, and the reason I actually don't answer the phone is because of the scams, and it's usually around the financial year, which is happening now in Australia. So I just thought, oh, I can't deal with this. But once I picked up the phone, and it was a young guy who had such a friendly demeanor. And he's like, oh, I'm so excited to talk to you, Jovana. I found you on LinkedIn, blah, blah, blah. And as we started talking, he started to open up, and he told me he didn't fake anything. He just said, oh, I'm actually doing a cold call. This is my first cold call. And I'm so glad that you picked up. And then I don't know what he was selling. I think it was something to do with software, but he said this was a challenge that his business coach gave him. And I ended up speaking to him for maybe good 40 minutes, just having a good chat, like a friendly chat. And you feel like you hang up after that phone call, you feel like you actually made a difference to somebody. And you feel positive about it. It's not a negative experience.
Yes. And I think, points that you've kind of hit on there is, authenticity is key. The fact that caller was very honest in sharing with you, oh, well, this is actually my first cold call. And, I'm so glad that I got onto you. That really helps in building rapport. And I think, unfortunately, cold calling, telemarketing, all of that industry, which obviously I am in and my team is in, it's been really tarnished because I think people have this perception that when you get a cold call, it's just going to be very robotic. It's like they're reading a script, and I get them all the time. I'm obviously someone that when I get a cold call, I listen intently because I'm like, I wonder how they're going to go with this. And sadly, a lot of them will read a script, verbatim. Even if you try to ask them questions, they can't really veer off of the page either. And that would be my feedback to everyone listening. Again, when you're, reaching out, you have that kind of sales process, that step-by-step guide, but the key word there is guide. Feel free to have kind of an open conversation and know that each conversation is going to be different. When you ask questions, you might be taken down different paths, and you've just got to be yourself and be natural and, be honest and all of that. I think that's half the way that we can produce results is, having an authentic discussion with people rather than trying to kind of, have this real salesy, robotic approach. That's for sure.
That's exactly spot on, because one of our values is to, in automation, is to humanize this personal connection, humanize communication. Just can you appear as human as you can, and then don't automate parts where you have to be human. So there was one cold outreach via email that was 2 sentences, very clear, super on point. And I actually keep a swipe file. I think that's a really clever thing to do, even for our listeners. If you get this and you want to learn some tricks, you can actually keep a swipe file. And I thought, wow, this is amazing. I'm actually going to reply to this because I really like. what they said. So I said, I'm interested, blah, blah, blah. So I used the keywords, probably interested. But I thought such a first message was so personal and so connecting. And I thought, wow, they actually did some research. They know me. This is not a robotic kind of thing. And then within maybe 2 hours, I get back-to-back emails from names. One was very, here's a proposal, here's our brochure, impersonal, like no name.
Yes.
And then a personal one, which also was automated. It didn't capture any of the essence of the first email. And I thought, wow, this is like 5 different people wrote this email. I'm so duped. I'm just going to ignore you.
And do you know what? I mean, this is, something we're touching on here is, the value as well of that personalized phone call, because that's the other, thing that people forget. I think, when it comes to like cold outreach and say we're, reaching out to someone on a cold list, people have this fear that, again, it's going to be perceived as, a real salesy pitch and, I don't want to bother people. However, there's nothing more personalized than having a great discussion with someone. Quite often, and I know listeners will be the same, we're bombarded with these LinkedIn messages of people trying to pitch their services. And the ones that resonate with me are really personalized. They will say, hey, Ash, we met a few months ago here. I was thinking of you because we have this service, blah, 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 blah. Would you have some time to catch up about it? And I don't mind messages like that because, as you said, they've taken the time to tailor it, specifically to me. And again, it kind of comes back to that what's in it for me pitch. They've listened to that. But alongside of that, making a call will make it so much more powerful because I often say, I get these LinkedIn messages, some of them resonate, but no one ever makes a follow-up call. If someone actually called me and said, Ash, I sent you that LinkedIn message a couple of days ago, I wanted to follow up with you. Instead, it's just these automated messages, like you said, Jovana, that just don't get any connection. So I think it's my way of just reinforcing to people that, again, cold calling is still so relevant. And I think it's a way of really personalizing yourself and making yourself stand out from the competition because everyone is trying to automate, and just depersonalize things.
Yes, depersonalize, which is where I also wanted to ask you is where this AI, the AI revolution is coming. And this is a big thing happening in the tech space, but it's also now disrupting every single part of every industry. And I think people can now go onto these AI tools and create their own sales hooks and all this content that they need and scripts and things like that. And I still feel that they may not know that as an expert exactly what is right, what is wrong to do. As a non-expert, you would go in and ask AI to produce something that may be very average, and it usually does spit out some average content, very impersonal, sometimes very good, when it's really short text. If you need something for subject lines and very quick CTAs, yes, but if you start asking it to do 2 or 3 paragraphs, it's going to struggle to be on point.
Yes.
So I wonder, do you find AI disrupting this cold outreach space for you?
Yeah, I personally, I've been like blown away by the capabilities of AI. When my husband introduced me to ChatGPT, I was like, this is life-changing, this is amazing. So I'm definitely someone who I've embraced it, but I think you're spot on when you say it's almost like you were touching on the fact that I think it has a time and a place because yes, it's going to be able to help people, but will it completely replace, sales or, cold callers and lead generators and the like? Absolutely not. And I think it comes back to what we've been talking about, which is that human to human connection that people crave. I mean, as a great example, how many of us ring, say, banks or, we want to speak to someone and we're faced with these automated services, which ultimately, that's the way that the AI is going is, you're going to talk to this machine and they're going to try and give you a response. But everyone just gets so frustrated and says, I just want to talk to someone, because they want that personalized answer. They want people to understand them and provide that empathy that I don't think AI is ever really going to be able to achieve. And so, yeah, I would say as a recommendation to people, embrace AI for certain reasons. I mean, I've used it. I have actually, asked, say the likes of ChatGPT to produce some scripts and approaches at times, just as kind of like a curiosity thing of what will they come up with. And as you said, some of them, if they're short and simple, are very good. They'll really resonate. but then we still have to add that human element. Like we will still take that script, take it to market and find that, well, this doesn't really resonate. We have to tweak it, maybe add, something of our own flair. So yeah, definitely is an exciting thing to be happening, I think, at the moment, but I definitely don't think it will replace, that need for that human interaction and for personalization, authenticity, all of that.
Yeah,
so.
I think I agree with you. Yeah, I think it's going to be, if every business embraces that human connection over AI, they will just be standing apart from everybody else. And it's great positioning. I don't know if I have any other questions for you. Is there anything
We've
else?
talked about so much, which is fantastic. We've kind of jumped around a whole range of topics. Yes. And I hope that ultimately it's going to inspire people, especially if they're, purchasing those cold lists, to get a bit more focused with it, to have a great approach, but also to know that it's still a very powerful method for generating new business. That's for sure.
No, I've learned a lot as well. And, just even buying lists from trusted brokers, that's a big one, because there are hundreds and hundreds of businesses, I'm guessing, receiving these cold outreaches themselves with going, hey, we have hundreds of these particular verticals that you can speak to, and you have no trust. You have no knowledge if they actually have a qualified database for you. So it's really great that you can talk to someone like yourself who has expertise, buying lists, qualifying lists, helping you come up with a positioning, script, a pitch. That's a big one, I have to say. Just being the art of the right pitch.
Yes. And it is an art. You're right, Jovana. Like, for the listeners not to beat themselves up, that getting your elevator pitch or a pitch right on the first go is very rare. Like, we'll have to test it out several times. And you can do that by, even attending networking events or, pitching it to a co-worker or something of that nature, test and measure, because having a few up your sleeve is very advantageous as well for all different scenarios. But yes, it's definitely an art form to master an elevator pitch. That's sure.
Right. And so once you have that in place, then you can talk about AI and technology and automation and everything else.
Yes.
Easy. Thank you so much, Ashleigh. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed talking with you again. And I hope that our listeners reach out to you as well if they need any help with the cold outreach.
Yeah, I was definitely going to say that, if anyone's heard anything that they've, kind of thought, well, I'd love assistance with that. Even if it's just being put in touch with a good list broker, because I certainly had to do my research, having done it for 12 years, I was dealing with a whole range of different ones, and I've tended to find those that produce, the best kind of quality data. And but at the end of the day, if you also don't want to do your calling, because not many people do, that's where we can step in as well. So feel free to reach out, and we'd love to assist you.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.